But I must say I'm glad that they saved a space for me because tickets are in high demand here. So we're glad you're here and glad to get started. There's a number of people, too many to name by name, who helped make this event possible, but we want to indicate our general gratitude. That includes some donors who have helped offset expenses. It cost money to publish the proceedings of this event, to rent this space, to get our friends from abroad here to join with us, the scholars who will present, especially Margaret Barker and Lawrence Hemming. So we'll have ways to recognize donors to the Religious Studies program, to the Temple Conference, but it always is a great public gift. We'd like to thank particularly, I hope they can hear the sound of my voice out in the hall, but Ms. Monica Ingold and Diane Bused, who are the staff assistants in the History Department and Religious Studies program, have done extraordinary service. When we were contemplating putting this together and decided that unlike many of our religious studies programs, we would need to charge for this conference some modest but not entirely insignificant amount. $50 would be the standard going rate. Then we didn't know how many people would pay $50 for the conference. So we talked in terms of numbers of maybe we'll have a small seminar with some exchange like 35 people or 50 people, and as soon as we opened it up for registration, it quickly eclipsed that number, and as it approached 100, we moved it from a room or two that we were planning on here to the auditorium, but that didn't slow the numbers any, and so this room holds 400, and the empty seats that you see, I think, will be full before we're through, or if anyone purchased registration and doesn't make it, that will be too bad, because we did have to turn away a good number of people because of the size of the space. Most of all, we'd like to thank the scholars who have come to us from here regionally and from Britain, and to thank you for being here. You as partly receptive but partly interactive audience. We're grateful, and you don't all come from Logan, Utah. We have registrations from all over the state, all over the Intermountain area, a number from around and about in the United States, and some from internationally. So it's a pleasure to have everybody with us, and it should make for a rich exchange. With an audience this size, however, the academic study of religion may not be a familiar enterprise. A number of you are scholars yourselves, either formally or informally. A lot of you read widely. A lot of you, I anticipate, are just interested in the topic. The temple has a particular resonance here. Whether you're LDS or not, it's an important fixture in the culture, but especially for Latter-day Saints, it of course has some vibrancy, some alive concern. But talking about the temple academically can be hard. It can be terrifically rewarding, but it can be hard. And if you don't have much preparation for that, I urge you not to get discouraged. If Gary Anderson or some wise guy on the program seems to be talking over our heads, we'll slap him around a little bit with the questions we ask, and he'll explain that process of how we'll go about those questions. Cards have been made available to you on the way in. But I'd urge you not to get discouraged if you grasp 30 or 50% of what's going on in a given scholar's talk. That's a place to start. And then there's time for questions and follow-ups well beyond this conference. We're contemplating the possibility of reassembling In a year or so, we'll see how you feel about that by the time the day's over, and we'll seek your feedback about that possibility. So don't get discouraged. Take what you can, and that'll be a starting place. Within the academy, within the formal academic study of religion, there's a lot of ways to go about that. Among the ways to parse the topic of religion, because the academic study of religion is not exactly a discipline, or at least scholars who do it professionally debate whether it's a discipline or not. But it's safe to say that it's a topic that has a lot of disciplinary approaches. So we study, if I were to show you the American Academy of Religion program book that's thick like a telephone book, there's sociology and religion, psychology of religion, ritual studies, specific tradition studies like Buddhism or Jainism or Christianity. There's the history of religion, comparative religion, philosophy of religion, science and religion. It gloms on to every possible topic, so it's a very interactive topic. And more broadly, there's a distinction between theological studies and religious studies. Theological studies, and all these terms are debated, even what religion is debated and notoriously difficult to define. We have some sort of intuitive sense of what it is, but when you start examining it, start trying to demarcate the concept, then it can get a little complex. But with broad strokes, what I tell my students is that theological studies is a critical, it's not the doctrine or dogma, which is another way to use the term theological, but theological studies is a critical reflection on faith from within. Anselm famously put it in the 12th century or 11th century. It's faith-seeking understanding with rigor. And religious studies is a cooler discipline, tries to have less passion and be more in the direction of seeing without, and scholars who are or are not themselves religious, or if we're doing Mormon theology or Buddhist theology, practitioners of religious studies may or may not be Mormon or Buddhist or Catholic, but these two approaches need each other for the most rigorous result. And so I compare them to my students to biography and autobiography. In my analogy, theological studies is analogous to autobiography, where you're thinking about the tradition and its meaning and its doctrines, its values from within, and trying to understand it. And with equally broad brushstrokes, religious studies is studying it biographically from without. And there are dangers to both those approaches, and there are virtues and assets to both those approaches. Autobiographically, there's no way you can get fully inside me and understand me, of course. And insiders, believers within a religious tradition, a broad one like Judaism or Christianity, speak an internal language, have an internal mode, and there's ways that to fully understand you have to sort of be in there and feel it and practice it. But on the other hand, if I want my story told as an individual, Philip Barlow, if my fate should not be what it is and it had happened that I had been an important person, I'm the real first Mormon president of the United States after Mitt Romney fails, for instance, and people were to attempt to get at the meaning of my life, it wouldn't be sufficient just to have me autobiographically reflecting on it. Others would have angles of vision that would be necessary to the story if I were an important public figure like that. Historians of the Barlow presidency might have an IQ 6 times mine and have 4 PhDs in 4 different subjects and be able to get at my psychology, locate my gender, my Mormonness, my Americanness, my station in history in relation to a lot of other stuff. So theology needs critical outside questioning of religious studies, and religious studies needs the inside critical reflection of theological study. You'll hear little strands or wafts of that, I suspect, throughout the day, and you might attune your ears to them. We were having a bit of an interesting discussion last evening as we contemplated the potential future of the Academy for Temple Studies and Utah State University's program in hosting it. Finally, what is religion, I say, can be a complex matter. And the lower courts of the land and the Supreme Court of the United States has quite a history in trying to define it. They used to call in fancy thinkers like the Protestant theologian Paul Tillich to testify about what it is, because we always had tricky groups who weren't, for instance, who weren't too keen on religion but didn't want religion getting a tax break, and so they'd invent their own religion, the religion of Bacchus, religion of Epicureanism, and so my religion is pleasure, and what I want is to make whoopee with whomever I want to make whoopee with, and I want lots of alcohol and red Maseratis, and call that a religion and get tax breaks. And so for various reasons more compelling than that, but those are interesting examples, they would end up in the courts, and the courts would be in the odd position of having to define religion, so they'd call in some scholar or another. So Paul Tillich defined religion as one's ultimate concern, or others have defined religion as what one does when no one else is looking. Or some have defined religion as the quest for the transcendent. I'm going to propose to you, just as a preface to today's proceedings, that religion has a number of common elements if it's going to be a full-blown religious movement. These days, as you've been reading lately, perhaps the fastest growing segment of the population in relation to religion is what we call the nones, N-O-N-E-S. That is, those who define themselves as having no religion, no organized religion. Some of those people are irreligious and skeptical, and some of you present may be among them. The majority of them, however, fly under the flag of I am spiritual but not religious. That is, it's an increasing rejection of organized religion, which is part of the American drift movement dynamic towards less regard for institutions as such, which is a tricky, debatable, and dangerous direction in my estimate, but certainly a strong one. I'm going to suggest as a preface to think about that one way to define religion is that it has 4 elements. Catherine Albanese out in California, an American scholar of American religion, found a series of letters, the C's, to help us remember them. She suggests that religion is a full-blown religious movement includes a creed, that is, things that they believe, a worldview, code, that is values and moral strictures, community, one does it together. Religio is also a contested etymology, but the predominant sense of religion is to bind together, to bond together. And 4th, cultus, which is a Latin technical term for ritual system. So we're going to talk about the temple, and among other things with the temple we're going to have ritual on our minds and have our ears attuned to ritual. I've heard and I've read of anthropologists arguing that if people don't have ritual, they're not fully human. They're not a fully human society. The ritual is a symbol system, sometimes in motion, an enacted symbol system of the community and of the value system and of the code, the value system and the creed, the belief system. So ritual is terribly important. And again, in that American Academy of Religion book, there would be an important sliver of professionals who study ritual. So ritual studies is a subcategory of the study of religion. And ritual studies could take the form of the study of sacraments or of pilgrimage or any number of enacted rituals. There are important, compelling ones to study, not just in the Judeo-Christian tradition, about temples and the rituals enacted there and represented there. So I'm particularly excited for the intellectual feast we'll have during the day. And again, thanks so much for coming here. I'll give you one more example. The Religious Studies program does a lot of things, but this last week, ending Friday, we had an academic expert, Dr. Han Lee. I hope some of you saw this if you're here locally. And 2 monks from Tibet who took 4 full days to build grain of sand by grain of sand, and gorgeous colored sacred sand mandala. And the meaning of that was so rich, and being able to exchange with them all week long as they constructed this thing, and then stuck a knife in my heart and sliced me and made me participate in taking a broom of peacock feathers and on Friday morning, after all of that meticulous construction, to undo the mandala. I wanted to keep it here for a year or two. It was so wonderful. But that represented in me, according to Buddhist understanding, attachment. I was too attached to it, and part of the ritual was precisely to disaggregate things, to symbolize the transience of the cosmos and of all things, and to help us feel the process of detaching. So as recently as last week, we were indulged in a very different way in the study of ritual. So I'm excited for the day. I'll introduce my friend Gary Anderson to you. Many of you, if you're here locally, will know of Gary, and not a cowboy intellectual, but a lawyer intellectual. I know that sounds oxymoronic, but it's true. He's a lawyer intellectual, and he's wonderful, and he's been central to bringing this event into fulfillment. So, Gary.
Thanks to Phil, because without him and his gracious staff, this would not have happened, and it's just remarkable to look out and see so many people here today. I'm going to first do some housekeeping. That's one of the things that happens, and I'm trying to help you be more comfortable and to answer questions that you might have. So I'm just going to go through a list of those things, and then I'll talk about how we got this put together, and then we'll have our panel. First of all, we do need to make clear that no recording is allowed today. We are filming and recording for archival purposes, and we will utilize those resources to make available a proceedings book. So please make sure that all of you, before you leave today, have given us your most current email address, because once we get the proceedings book ready, we need to figure out how to get it to you. So as you leave, or in terms of in and out today, if you just make sure that those that we know how to find you, we would appreciate that. Procedure for questions. Because we have such a large group here and because we would run into significant problems in recording if we had to hand mics back and forth or try to hear people, we have passed out to you these cards, and we would like you, if you have questions during the day, and we'll have times during the day when we'll answer questions, those questions will be gathered up by our student assistants, and then we'll get them to Jack Welch, and he'll screen those so that he can parse them out during the day. The other thing that we would appreciate, if you want to, is to put your email address on the card, and if we don't get to that question, we'll keep track of that, and then we'll try to email you some information to help answer the question. So hopefully that will facilitate the process. Parking passes. We are getting into the mundane here, but we're going to go to the sublime shortly, okay? Parking passes. If you parked at the Big Blue, and that's the Big Blue Terrace that's on 7th North, you can get a pass during the day for $5, and you'll be able to come and go as you please, because that's good for that, because they have somebody there to attend that. If you parked down in the Aggie Terrace, which is just below Old Main Hill, they don't have people coming and going. I mean, they don't have people there, so we'll have to give you some tokens, but then that means you can't come and go. Just to clarify that, and the people out in front, Monica and Diane, can help you with that. Lunch options. I hope that you all picked up a map as you came in, and if not, there's still some maps out there by the door, but this gives you several places where you can access lunch facilities, because we'll have an hour-and-a-half lunch, but and if you want to go off campus, that's fine, but we at least tried to make that available for you, and hopefully we've been told that they've been warned that they do have an influx, so they should have plenty of food. One of the questions that's been asked is, why Monday? I will tell you why Monday. And I'll get into this a little later, but my connection with Margaret Barker goes back quite a ways. And when we came up with this idea to invite her this last spring, I wrote her an email and I said, Margaret, would you be available sometime between now and the end of the year to come to Logan, Utah and present? She was very gracious in saying, yes, I would be available on one 4 days gap in my schedule. And it turned out that by figuring out how to get her over the weekend and getting her back, the only day that fit was October 29th. So that turned out to be a Monday, and I'm just glad you weren't deterred by the fact that it's on a Monday. Actually, as I looked around at the other schedules, there are a lot of things happening on weekends, and I suspect we may have gotten a little better turnout on Monday, October 29th, than we would have done on other weekends during the fall, but we'll never know that. The handouts, I hope you all have picked up the schedule, the outline of our program today. We had them all out there, and I hope that you got that, and we'll try to follow that quite closely so that we can get through everything we have to do today. We will be talking today. Oh, there's a model of the temple out in the foyer out there that was prepared by Dr. Grant Davies, and he excavated temples like this for 12 years in Israel. And so I hope that you'll take an opportunity to take a look at that. And we do also appreciate Benchmark Books coming and making some books available as well. And then, Margaret, did we get your flyers out there for your book? Okay. There's a special from the publisher T&T Clark. So if you pick up a flyer that's on the desk out there, it says Mother of the Lord, that's Margaret's latest book, they are offering a discount. If you pick that up, there's a code or something like that you can utilize to get a discount on that book. So hopefully that handles most of our housekeeping matters. if our good people out there at the desk will try to help you as best we can to accommodate you, and hope that you have an enjoyable and worthwhile experience today. Now, let me move towards getting into the program. Let me, and I'm just going to tell you what got me into this study of temple studies, and then what brings us to today. To give you a framework to deal with our topic today, let me quote from Hugh Nibley in his article, The Meaning of the Temple. "The temple must be here, be there. It is not just a myth. It is the core of all of our civilization. In 1930, this concept began to reemerge at Cambridge. The Cambridge School began calling what they taught there patternism, because they saw the ancient teachings all falling into the same pattern. The ordinances of the Egyptian temple were essentially the same as those performed in ours." And this is, of course, written to a Mormon audience by Hugh Nibley. "And that can be explained very simply. They have a common origin. The clue is given in Abraham 1, verse 26. Pharaoh, being a righteous man, established his kingdom and judged his people wisely and justly all his days, seeking earnestly to imitate that order established by the fathers in the first generations, in the days of the first patriarchal reign, even in the reign of Adam, and also of Noah his father, who blessed him with the blessings of the earth. He sought diligently, he sought earnestly to imitate the order that went back to the fathers of the first generation in the first patriarchal reign. The Egyptian ordinance also always had one purpose: to go back to the Septepi, the first time, the time of the first man, who was Adam. The Egyptians didn't have it, and they knew it, so they sought to imitate it. The ancient temple ordinances, called mysteries, are found in various degrees of preservation. If you ask what Joseph Smith knew about real temples, I reply, everything. Now, of course, that's Hugh Nibley talking from a Mormon perspective. But what I'm going to talk about, since we have both a Methodist preacher with us today and a Catholic theologian, there are some very interesting interconnections, even though this comes from a Mormon perspective. Let me shift gears now and talk to you about my connections with the Temple Studies group and two of the founding members, Margaret Barker and Lawrence Hemming. The first, the Methodist preacher I just talked to you about, and Lawrence Hemming, who's the Catholic theologian. They're both here, and they will be presenting shortly. I first became aware of Margaret some years ago. I had run across some things she had written about early Christianity and the temple. My interest increased when she spoke at the Words of Joseph Smith Symposium in 2005 at the Library of Congress. Through some friends, I started sending emails to her on items about temple studies, and on another visit to my grandkids and doing some family history research, I ended up going to visit her and her husband in Barlow, Derbyshire, a few miles away from Heanor, where some of my ancestors lived. Then I found out that they were starting temple study seminars, and I attended the first one at St. Stephen's House, Oxford, where I met Lawrence Hemming, a Catholic theologian who was presenting a paper on Melchizedek. That was interesting for me. With that in mind, let me identify some unique doctrines that Joseph Smith introduced into Christendom of his day through the Book of Mormon and his revelations, and then I'm going to compare that with some of the things that relate to temple studies. Most of you, if you are LDS, may be familiar with that, and for those of you who aren't, I'll just kind of help you understand what Joseph Smith was doing in his own day that was somewhat revolutionary. First of all, he taught the Bible is not complete or totally accurate. For reference, see the 8th Article of Faith of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There are a number of books referred to in Scripture that we do not have. And they're referred to throughout the Scriptures, and Joseph Smith actually had a revelation on what do we do with those books. The Apocrypha contains many things of worth. That was in Doctrine and Covenants, section 29. Jesus Christ is Jehovah, or Yahweh, God of the Old Testament. And Margaret said a lot about that. The importance of Enoch and Melchizedek, who have almost been eliminated from the Bible. Joseph Smith actually, when he's translating the Bible, comes up with a new book called the Book of Enoch. And he talks a lot about, in the Revelations, Melchizedek. He also talks about an understanding of the relationship between the Melchizedek and Aaronic priesthoods. And that's frankly how Lawrence and I got really well acquainted, because we got into a heavy discussion. Found out he was coming to Salt Lake 2 weeks later, and we've been fast friends ever since. Joseph Smith also talked about seeing God face to face. This is possible, as in the Old Testament. That's what we call the first vision. When I say we, and again, I suspect you understand that I'm LDS, but the plurality of gods and man can become as God. The concept of a mother in heaven. The temple is the focus of religion and needs to be among God's people so that sealing ordinances can be performed. Now let me go to the Temple Studies site that the Temple Studies group in the UK has up on the web. Just go to Temple Studies group. I'm just reading from some things there. Temple theology suggests that the current Old Testament is neither the text nor the canon that was known and used by the first Christians. That the non-canonical writings were preserved by Christians and excluded by Jews because they marked important differences between them. That sola scriptura has hindered rather than helped the understanding of Christianity. And sola scriptura basically means that what we've got in the canon is it. Okay, that's all we've got. That Christianity was heir to the temple tradition, and so was by no means a new religion in the first century. This sounds eerily familiar. Margaret has told me on more than one occasion that you cannot understand the Bible unless you understand the temple. And if I've misquoted you, you've got an opportunity to reflect back, Margaret. I met Lawrence Hemming when I first went to the Temple Studies Group Symposium. He stopped in the middle of his paper on Melchizedek and commented that it is the Mormons who point him in the right direction when he's looking for something. There were only 3 of us in that group, and I thought, what's he talking about? He has taught me much through his study of early Christian liturgy. I quote from a letter he wrote to me. Gary, you and I have often discussed the meaning of priesthood in our different traditions. The remarkable closeness of this understanding is a constant source of amazement to me. It was not easy to reach in my own tradition. Its expression in Catholic worship is carefully hidden and revealed at the same time. Something of the same coyness and religious hesitation about speaking publicly of sacred things is also a part of your tradition, something else we have in common. The relationship between the priesthoods of Aaron and Melchizedek, the Levitical, inherited, ordained priesthood, and the priesthood conferred on the church for the sake of eternity is no longer dwelt upon by many Catholics, even by theologians. But it is here in our own non-canonical sacred texts, the texts of our ancient liturgy. And again, I'm trying to be as clear as I can. Liturgy, I have learned, for a Mormon, is going to the temple. Next to the canonical scriptures, the texts of the sacred liturgy are the most sacred texts we have. My own researches have consistently led me to believe their origins or roots are grounded in the first Jerusalem temple. This is still quoting Lawrence. They are the memory and record of the secret and open traditions God has given for the work of restoration and exaltation of the whole creation that I mentioned earlier. They tell a story that is often remarkably confluent with the story told by Latter-day Saints, and especially in the writings of Joseph Smith, writings which I have come to know. My connection with Margaret and Lawrence is what led me to think about organizing this conference and inviting them to participate. So without further ado, we'd like to invite Margaret and Lawrence up, and then John Hall and Jack Welch. Please come up. And Dan Peterson, yes, sorry.